On this edition of the Newsbreak, we are chatting with Ryan Pieper, Urban Forester for the City of Northport. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here again. You
Always
recently were on as well. This time, we're talking all about protecting trees. Big deal here in the City of Northport for residents and for you guys in the Natural Resources Division. So I know that there's an ordinance in place for protecting trees. So what are the main objectives of that ordinance?
It is the objective of the code itself and the newly formed division. The title kind of says it all, tree protection regulations.
Yes,
So that's
right.
what we're looking to do as we build out and develop.
Right.
Understanding that we can't save every tree, nor can I plant every tree, or
Sure.
nor should we clear cut every tree. So
Yeah.
a balanced approach is what we're looking to do, being fully understanding of where a tree is not going to be successful after development. Tier 1, protect where you can't, replant where you can't replant, mitigate. So some
Sure.
form of that as we move forward. And I think the language in the code itself is looking to achieve that balance.
Awesome. So as far as Northport goes, how do we define a tree, like for regulatory purposes?
Okay, so the definition's kind of, it says a living woody self-supporting plant, that could reach 10 feet in height. A mulching permit would look for a tree over 3 inches in diameter to be considered a tree. Anything under 3 inches could be mulched under a mulching permit.
Okay, got it.
Anything that is protected tree would be 12 inches to 24 inches, or 23 and 7/8.
Yeah.
And 24 inches and greater is considered a heritage tree. So I'd say anything over 12 inches is protected per the code language. We would give credit for that 3-inch to 12-inch for the preservation credits, and look to address it in that fashion. But it's defined in multiple ways. So
Sure.
heritage tree.
So like, is a palm tree a tree here in Northport? Because it's technically not a tree, right?
It's not biologically a tree,
Yeah, okay,
but
yeah.
the city does recognize it, again, under that mulching definition. If you're looking to mulch a property, it's speaking to understory vegetation, trees 3 inches in diameter or less, or a palm that's 54 inches or less.
Got it. Okay.
Is not considered a tree. 54 inches and greater would be considered a tree.
I see. Okay, got it. Okay, now we know what Northport thinks trees are.
There you go.
I love it. So how does Northport address the protection of the heritage trees that you mentioned then?
Okay, so the city of Northport, it's kind of unique. We don't have the beaches of Sarasota, the history of St. Augustine. So the city
Right.
commissions that we have had over the years have recognized its natural essence as its most valuable commodity. And with that, heritage trees have gained a status of protection and have their own unique language. So they are defined as heritage at 24 inches in diameter or greater. So how do we protect them through construction activity? We look to try to erect barricades at the farthest extent of the drip line, and that is where the branch extends out the farthest way it possibly can. And if we can get those barricades out all the way to the drip line, perfect. We'll kind of monitor how that encroaches from the drip line, because that is where we have our absorption capabilities out there.
Sure.
And the farther inward we get, that's when we're starting to sacrifice the structural integrity of the tree.
Right.
So we want to try to make sure that they are protected through the construction activity with, some instances you're excavating down, some instances you're adding fill on top. So both can be impactful. Other trees like pine trees, which we have quite a few here in the city.
Yes, we do.
They're going to be a little more susceptible to any type of construction activity, whether it be fill, excavation, or just the machinery going over top of the root system. They're not as densely structured, the roots I'm referencing, so they can be collapsed and
I see.
crushed.
Okay.
So if we can keep machinery out of the root zone the best of our ability, we're going to
Right.
explore. Every site and every tree is going to be specific to itself, so we're just going to have to monitor and make sure we couple that with just signage and try to do that in different languages and just really kind of, snapshot what the objective is up front, and hopefully that can be translated through whether it be us to the developer to the site guys, the office people, and have some kind of synergy there.
Some kind of understanding
Correct.
across all the people involved.
Yes.
Because I think I remember Isn't there, you guys sometimes put out like snow fencing or something around a certain perimeter? I think I saw with a recent construction project that had been put up around a heritage tree. Is that part of the way you block them off too?
That could be a form, the orange snow fencing.
Yeah.
Yes. We just want to create a visible and
Yeah.
effective barrier where, say, you're on a machine, it's beep, beep, beep,
Yeah,
you're backing
right.
up. You're in your headspace looking forward, you're backing up. You want to encounter something before you encounter the tree.
Right.
And just really call out the importance of not affecting that root system. So whether
Right.
I know what I'm doing there on site or I'm able to discern exactly what the objective of that site excavation or clearing activity is going to be.
Sure.
Silt fencing is another form because, especially during rainy season, if we have a lot of material on site soil and it encounters a rain deluge,
Right.
a lot of that silt can wash into the root zone and that can be impactful just the same as excavating. So
Gotcha. So to jump away from construction here for just a little bit, what are the city's policies regarding relocating existing trees that are on the same property? And I know that can also sometimes coincide with construction, but how do we address that?
You know, in some instances, it's the lesser of two evils. So up until CO, it's an animal or
What is CO?
certificate of occupancy when we're
Thank you.
developing a property.
Got
Sorry.
it. No, that's okay.
We're dealing with the builders at that point. Now, once the developers or builders have gotten the certificate of occupancy, they now sell the home to the property owner, the new homeowner. So we might have had this requirement to plant trees, save trees, this, that, and the other. Well, they want a pool. They want a shed. It might collide with what their end game is going to be. And
Sure.
we're not looking to dictate and tell people what they're going to do with their private property, especially
Yes.
if it's a brand new tree that was planted to achieve a canopy. That would be the lesser of two evils of just getting rid of the tree. Can we look for other spaces on the property that would be the right location for that tree that would not conflict?
Okay.
So, yes, we are going to promote that. Wouldn't be a permit process if it's within the property boundaries. Some more mature or established trees are going to be less suitable for relocation or transplanting. They just, might have a taproot and they don't like that type of effort.
Right.
So it might be better to just go ahead and permit the removal of that existing tree that was for preservation and look to replant. That's kind of how, I'm going to say it again and again probably, it's somewhat of a tiered approach where we can preserve trees, great. Where it collides with proposed development, let's look to replant elsewhere. Where we can't get that canopy out of the ground, we're going to mitigate that to plant elsewhere in the city.
Yeah, that's a big deal. I know this is exciting for a lot of people in the city that we're starting to ramp up talks about all of this with this new division that we have here at the city. And so I don't know if this is super covered under the tree ordinance, but will this deal in like exotic or invasive tree species at all? And if so, what are the measures taken there with those?
There's not a mandate that you shall remove your exotic species. We're not the exotic police driving around and saying, hey, your pepper trees are going crazy.
Right.
It's an exemption in the code language that would not require a permit for removal. If you're building a new commercial or residential property, you shall remove them at that point to obtain the certificate of occupancy. Code enforcement in some instances will send letters to adjacent property owners where pepper trees or other invasive species have come over and impinging over the property line.
Okay.
It gives the resident that has the home the ability to remove that invasive species back to the property line, to the sky.
Okay.
And that's considered impinging growth. In some instances, if it's potentially hazardous and the city has funds available, they could remediate that problem with removing it after sending the adjacent property owners a letter. Sometimes we just don't get a response. So if there is funding available, they can explore if it's a hazardous situation to do that work and lien the property if we don't get any correspondence back from the property owner.
Got it. Okay. So it becomes an issue when it starts to become an issue for the adjacent homeowners more than, so if they just have a Brazilian pepper tree in their yard, but it's not touching anybody else's property, nothing can really be done, right?
You as the homeowner that's having
Yeah.
the property affected have the right to trim that back to the property line.
Mm-hmm.
And they are exempt. It's not like you're not doing them a favor by maintaining that exotic species for them, but we
Yeah.
can't say you can go over the property line.
Right. Right.
There is thought of the 10-foot fire break as
Okay.
it relates to invasive species. It needs to have a certain level of monitoring because there could be gopher tortoises, there could be what somebody's calling a pepper tree, and it's actually a holly, or some
Got
type
it.
of
Okay.
oversight.
Yeah.
But that, I think, is a case-by-case scenario where we need to go out and just evaluate what is being proposed.
Definitely. Okay. So I know we discussed a little bit about how to protect trees during the construction process, but what else is required to protect them during that or land clearing activities?
Okay, so how the permit is somewhat structured is to incentivize preservation. So if you have a certain amount of trees on your property and you preserve a portion of them, hopefully that will wash out the mitigation fee. So throughout the inspection process, we've evaluated the initial proposal. We've gone out and checked for gopher tortoises, scrubjay, you name it, all
Right.
the protected species or environmental concerns. So if you've identified trees that can remain throughout the construction activity, we would like to see them barricaded and protected and still on the property at the rough stage, meaning the initial, just after clearing activity has taken place, and say the form boards have come in and the pad is elevated. We're making sure that those trees aren't half dead, bumped into by the machines, roots are hanging out of the ground. They're going to be a viable contributor to the landscape after that.
Right.
So that would
Absolutely.
be a part of the process as far as inspection goes.
Okay, great. I mean, again, I know this city is such a green city. People are going to love hearing all of this in this podcast because it's like a lot of people's number one priority here in Northport. So then what role do trees play in Northport's stormwater management and flood control efforts? Because I know, we're in rainy season now. Things flood quickly around here. So tell me more about how we deal with that with stormwater management here.
So as you know, this is a city where there are miles and miles and miles of canals.
Mm-hmm.
And that is our stormwater control. It's very important. Being as flat as we are in Florida, the elevations that we have for every development are looking to get up out of the floodplain. But
Right.
all of that displaces water.
Mm-hmm.
So we have embankments on our ditches, our coastlines, you name it. There's not going to be a better stabilizer than a tree's root system. So if we can preserve existing,
Yeah.
great, let's
Mm-hmm.
do that. And then where we can't, we can explore maybe potentially planting plants or trees that will grab a hold of that embankment, especially when you're getting to these slopes that are, especially about 3-to-1, even 4-to-1 is kind of a stark slope
Right.
angle. So we really need to make sure you get the velocity of the water that comes down in these rain events, coupled with the sandy soil that we have.
Right.
So any measure that we can really stabilize those banks to keep them from eroding, that's going to be imperative. And trees, you're not going to find a better one to do
Sure.
that.
Yeah. So tell me more about that. What do the trees do to help with it? Me, a novice, not knowing what I'm talking about. Tell me more about that.
So what you're seeing above ground are all the branches, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a network that's equally going on underground. All the fibrous root systems that are going out, and they're all in concert with one another, intertangled with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And that will just stabilize the soil. Our sandy soil doesn't have a lot of clay in it, so it's going to allow for water percolation. And just like before Ian, we were at such a saturation point that the soil was just really spongy. And,
Right.
But the only thing really holding it together was the trees,
Mm-hmm.
roots, plants, roots, grass roots. All that network is intertangled with one another.
Right.
So it's really-
Interesting.
yeah.
I'm envisioning it like lattice work or something that's all just underneath, all linked together. Yeah. I've never thought about. I'm having a light bulb moment here talking to you. Never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
So I know we also in this city, we have a state park within our bounds. We have a lot of other parks and things like that. What are the regulations regarding trees in like conservation or preservation type areas?
Okay, so excuse me. The word itself, conservation and preservation, are kind of telling what we should be doing with these areas. Just
Right.
letting them
Kind of
be.
answers it, right?
Let them do what they do. Even
Right.
dead trees, like old dead snags, which are old pine trees. They can provide significant amount of habitat. So if I were to say we'd like to maintain it with management with dead tree removal, sometimes we want to keep that stuff and
Sure.
just let it be. There's bonneted bats, pileated woodpeckers, all different types of species that utilize those as their habitat. We would like to see in any instance invasive removal, management where we can, where funding and resources are available to do so. We'll explore that and even explore potentially fire maintenance, because that's
Right.
the natural way that Mother Nature
Yes.
does their thing. Does its
Yeah,
thing.
I feel like a lot of people don't understand that part, is people don't really get the prescribed burn type thing, but that's how things were dealt with thousands, millions, hundreds years ago. So it's kind of the natural way to do it. It feels weird that you're just lighting a forest on fire, but it's not like that.
Well,
Much more controlled.
in some areas where it abuts residential, we don't want to introduce that potential hazard.
Right.
Where there's mechanical means to mulch up that duff layer that's super flammable. You know how many lightning strikes we get this time of year. That's
Right.
just begging to go up. So
Yep.
if we can maintain it and manage it before it becomes an issue, we're going to look to do so.
Right. So I guess for conservation and preservation areas, we want to conserve and preserve them.
Yes, ma'am.
That's an easy answer to that question, huh? So finally, my last question for you, Ryan, is we kind of touched on this, but how do we balance protecting our trees, but also, respect property owners' rights and like what development? There's a lot of things to balance while doing this. So what are some of the things that we focus on when trying to balance all those things at the same time?
It is a challenge. I think it does warrant, a certain level of exploration in each one of them. What can be preserved? It's a tiered approach. So where we can preserve, let's explore it,
Right.
whether it be commercial or residential. Some of the residential aspects are getting tricky because you have to come up so high with the septic tanks or whatever for the pad. So anything that is existing is a bit tricky to preserve, but there are areas that you can and
Right.
achieve the proper drainage. So we explore what we can at the forefront, not have all the momentum of development collide with preservation.
Right.
So we're taking that concept and moving it to the front of the whole process. So it is, again, like you said, a balanced approach. We can't preserve every tree. We don't want to clear cut when we don't have to. If we can, on paper or on site, meet with developers, meet with people, and identify the heritage trees, the wetlands, the trees that are 12 inches, that are not heritage trees yet,
Right.
but still can be preserved. Buffering, there's a lot of things that we can use these natural essences for as we build out, and they are wonderful contributors to the environment and habitat, and a lot of good things come of these preservation efforts. But
Right.
when we can't preserve, how are we going to replant? And where we can't do either of those, where are we going to mitigate to get those monies collected so we can plant elsewhere to secure trees in the landscape for the foreseeable future? Because I see trees as one of the major investments that actually appreciate over time.
Absolutely.
So you
Yeah.
plant a 3-inch tree for, say, $300.
Mm-hmm.
Within 5-10 years, you have a 10, 12, 18-inch tree that's only
Right.
becoming more of a contributor.
Absolutely. So is there anything else you wanted to add today, Ryan, about tree protection or the future ordinance, anything like that?
The tree protection is imperative for the city as a whole. We really just, that is my favorite part of being a resident of Northport, having that feel that you're separate from the city, hustle bustle, the rat race of trying to get to and from work. It does feel like a natural setting, this place I call home, Northport. So where we can preserve trees, let's do so, and just the natural aspects all in itself. I call trees sentinels of the ecosystem below, because once you remove the tree, it's not intertwined with all that other subterranean ecosystem. So
Right.
they all work in concert with one another. So if we're protecting what's above ground, we're protecting what's below ground, and
True.
for the foreseeable future, we're protecting all of this for our kids. and their
Definitely.
kids.
Yeah. I love hearing your passion about this, Ryan. It's so fun to talk to you about this stuff. So I really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you so much. And for everybody listening, we will see you on the next one.